implemented a controller that, again, the responsibility of the controller should be to just be an interface between two worlds, right? The HTTP world, right, which is a streaming world. It's an ASCII world, back and forth, which is passing data back and forth, right, between the stream world and the JavaScript world, right, which is a world of arrays and objects, right, and functions and whatnot. So this controller, it sits between those two worlds. And that should be the only role of the controller, right? It should never be more than that, right? The controller just sits in between these two worlds and interfaces them. But notice that this controller is doing a little more than that, right? It's not only providing the interface between these two worlds, it's also taking the responsibility of accessing data, right? Our data source is just this hard-coded array. But even that should not be the responsibility or the role of the controllers. Instead, the responsibility of accessing and manipulating data and the models and data sources and whatnot, that should be the responsibility of services, right? So let's move some of that responsibility off of this controller and put the responsibility of data source management into a service. So let's in a separate directory, let's create another directory here, and let's call it the services directory. And we're going to create a service that deals with quizzes. So let's call it in JavaScript, in a JavaScript file, we'll call it quizzes.service.server.js. Okay, so in here, we're going to move this array. So let's move this out of the way here, and let's put it in there. There's our quizzes, right? We're going to encode the logic, right, of retrieving the particular quizzes, right? We're going to encode all that information in the services, right? So this function, this might be encapsulated in a function such as find a quiz by ID, for instance, or this could be just return to me all the quizzes, right? So let's do that. So let's declare here a couple functions. So we'll say find all quizzes, right? And this function is just doing what? It's just going to return all the quizzes. That's it, right? Whereas we're going to have another function, find quiz by ID, right? Which is going to take as argument a quiz ID, right? And it's going to do what? It's going to do this here, right? It's going to iterate over that quiz, right? Looking for that quiz for that ID. There it is, right? But instead of params quiz ID, is going to use the quiz ID that we're going to pass as argument. Right? Quiz ID. There it is, right? Okay, so it's going to iterate looking for that. So let's put this in a separate line, and then it's going to return that one quiz. All right, so we have these functions. We want to export these functions so that we can use them from our controller. So let's do that. We can create a map and then export it, and then assign it to module.exports. Remember, the module.exports, whatever you assign to module.export gets exported. It can be accessed from anybody who requires this file, right? So we're going to send a map, which is going to the map is going to map all these functions and tie them to a variable, right? So that somebody can access them, and here like that. And once we export it from our controller, we can import that. We can say const the quizzes service, right? We can require, and we can right now we're in the services in the controllers directory. We're going to go up one and then down to services, looking for the quizzes services. There it is. Once we have the quizzes services, right here we can replace this response.json. Right, and we can call quizzes service, find quiz by ID, and we can pass the request.params, right, the quiz ID, QID, like that. See that? Same thing with find all quizzes. We're going to, instead of this can be in a separate line, and this can be in a separate line. Actually, no, let's maybe here, like that. And this, instead of sending all quizzes, we can use now the service, right? We can say quizzes service dot find all quizzes. There we go. Respond like that. Okay. And there we go. The other thing we might do here, we can use ES6 to abbreviate this so that we don't have to type this twice, right? So we can just abbreviate it like this. You can save that. Let's see. I think we're done. Let's go back and try this out. Let's stop the server. We restart the server, and let's refresh here. And this is still working just the way we had it before. Excellent. Yeah. So we've implemented a couple of best practices, right, of breaking up our code into controllers and to RESTful controllers, right, and that use a service, right, to manipulate and access the data together. The controller, which is a RESTful controller, together with a service, right, together they implement what we call a RESTful web service. Okay.